Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening for the first bar series in this Rotary year, Mr. Venkat Viswanathan, the founder and chairperson of Latent View Analytics Limited. Venkat is a visionary behind Latent View. He has helped several Fortune 500 clients leverage an India-based knowledge services delivery model in several industries, including financial services, high-tech, consumer, retail, industrials, for over 25 years. Venkat was brought up in Chennai and until his family moved to New Delhi, where his father worked in the Comptroller and Auditor General's office. Soon after, he joined IIT Madras, where he studied civil engineering. While many of his friends and classmates decided to study further and go abroad, Venkat chose to stay in India and study management. It was also partly because he did not want to study engineering further. The Indian economy had already opened up, and that took him to IIM Calcutta. By the time Venkat graduated from IIM Calcutta, he had already been placed at ICRA, the credit rating agency, where he worked as a senior consultant before moving in Cognizant a few years later. Over the next few years, as India's IT sector grew into the world's most sought after, Venkat traveled the world, meeting customers across US and UK before the entrepreneurship bug finally bit him. It led him to start Latent View with a focus on business analytics solutions for global clients. From 2006 to 2014, Venkat served as the founding CEO of Latent View. Under his leadership, Latent View emerged as one of the fastest growing data analytics firms globally. In 2014, Venkat transitioned into a role of a chairperson and hired a professional CEO to address the large market opportunity and to build Latent View as a professionally run business, set up for a long-term success. What made us look up and take notice of Latent View was the blockbuster debut on the Bourses a year ago. Latent View Analytics received record bids worth 113,000 crores. That's 1,13,000 crores, the highest ever in the history of Indian primary market, during its 600 crore initial public offering. This was in November 2021. It is more than 5 times the demand for India's largest IPO from Paytm. The issue, which was priced at rupees 190 to 197, was oversubscribed 338 times. What's most interesting is this came just 2 days after the Paytm debacle. When he's not thinking about data and analytics, Venkat indulges his passions for biohacking, value investing, tech gadgets, measuring everything from his sleep, activity, cardiac health, metabolism, posture, and mindfulness. I'm told that at IIM Calcutta, he created the first email ID so that companies could contact them for placements. Am I right? With some friends of his, and a few years ago, they were invited to attend the placement day, and the first thing he checked was if this mail ID was live, and I understand it was still live. Yep. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Venkat Viswanathan. Feel free. If there is no time limit, you can
it's fine.
as much time as you want.
That's a risky thing to say with me.
Oh,
yeah. Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet all of you. Happy Diwali. And thanks all Rotarians for your service. This is one organization which does a lot of work behind the scenes. Not everyone knows about it, but it's great to meet all of you in person and hear some of those stories in the last few minutes. So he was just telling me there's no time limit, and I told him that's a risky move with me. You better watch the time and warn me if I'm going over time. So I'm going to spend maybe 30 odd minutes, and you can wave and warn me if I'm going past that. Broadly focusing on the Latent View journey. And for you to kind of stay the course with me, I'm looking at talking about the 3 M's, which I love repeating in various forums, and it's an ingredient for our business. Success, whatever we have had so far, as also I truly believe that's a mindset that people need to kind of have for running businesses. In my own personal thought process, the 3 M's are markets, minds, and money, right? And in that particular order. And I'm going to spend a few minutes each on each of those so that you get a sense for what it is. So our story goes back all the way to 2006. I did meet a few familiar faces as I walked in. And so as you mentioned, I had spent 10 years working in a couple of organizations. But I always had this bug inside my head that, hey, I need to figure out a way to start a company. No particular reason other than I was one of those last beneficiaries of the largesse of the Indian government and the taxpayers, where we built all these fancy government-run institutions where we paid a pittance. I still remember my annual fee was maybe 100 rupees a year, which covered all my tuition, and there's no other expense in terms of actually studying in one of the best schools in the country. And so there was this belief that, hey, we are told we got the best education, we have had the best opportunities, why can't we put this to good use and actually go out and start something, right? And I didn't really have the market in mind when I stepped out. I still remember the exit interview when I met some of the leadership at Cognizant, and they were trying to convince me, hey, what's wrong? You seem to be doing all right. You could have just continued down this path. And I'm trying to explain to them that, hey, this is more a stage of life decision. It's more, if I don't do it now, at 35, I don't know if I'll have the energy or the ambition or the interest to do it at 45 or 55. So I want to do it right now. And so they asked me, what are you going to do? So I said, I don't know. I will take some time off to figure out what I'm going to do. And it took me maybe about 6 months before we zeroed in on the idea, which eventually became LatenView. But in those 6 months, I did try various ideas. There was one around a software product, which where there were a couple of other co-founders, but for whatever reason, they were not ready to kind of cut the cord and actually come into the trenches and work with me as we build out the business. And that was a red flag for me, saying, I can't start a business if you're not fully committed. And there was another idea which was eventually a very good business model, but just not suited for my personality and my way of thinking, which is all around e-tutoring, which actually went on to become quite successful. It is just that it's not a business where I understood anything of, and I didn't really believe we had much to contribute as we got started. So eliminating all this, we ended up with analytics, and the more we researched, the more I found it intriguing, and it kind of lined up with a lot of interests that I have developed over my career, as also the people I met as co-founders shared with me the passion for those numbers and generating insights from data and all the things that we found out. And so LatenView got started in early 2006. The first 2 to 3 years, I would say, was all about what today the venture capitalists call the product market fit, but in general, it's about trying to, while you have a direction in which you want to kind of pilot, you still need market feedback. You still need sense for what are people ready to buy from you, and what is really your product offering, or what is really the service that you want to provide. And while there may be some ideas in our head, until money hits the bank, we still don't know if this is bankable or not. So I would say the first 2 to 3 years was all about this, validation, meeting multiple companies. Right from the very beginning, we had this ambition that we want to sell internationally, and it may be a rub-off of the time I had spent in Cognizant as well. It seemed very doable, saying, hey, this is what we are doing in a large company, selling to international customers, that's what we should do. But as it turns out, for a no-brand business, for first-generation entrepreneurs who really didn't know how to sell, for a relatively new offering, and I'm talking about 2006, right? 16 years back, we are talking about data analytics, right? I remember the first maybe 50 meetings, we had to first explain to them, what are you talking about, right? Why is this even important for me? And we need to evangelize the idea before we get any interest going. So international markets was proving a tough nut to crack. To keep us afloat, the first 3 years, I would say, we spent a lot of time selling in India. Whoever is ready to give us business, pretty much, right? But of course, we are still quite choosy, and we deliberately focused on the financial services segment, primarily Mumbai and Delhi, where many of these large companies were, and many of which were, as it turned out, and not by design, but as it turned out, joint ventures of multinationals with Indian business houses. Right? And the sector which kind of gave us those initial breaks were all life insurance in India, right? And those were very defining years for us as a company. For any entrepreneur, I think that first 1 crore in revenue or 1 million in revenue is a lot of hard work, it's a lot of blood and sweat and tears, and it's a personal validation. I still remember the conversation I had with my dad, who passed away just earlier this year, at that time saying, I'm quitting this job and I'm going to start a company. And for him, as he mentioned earlier, he worked in the central government of India, right? So before that, here in the AG's office here in Tenampet, and then the CNAG's, which is there in Delhi. And he couldn't even fathom why you would do that. As in, he's only worked in an organization all his life, and he gets a salary, and he was able to bring up a family really well, and he could support a lot of other family members, and he just couldn't understand why would you want that level of risk. But to their credit, both my parents were quite supportive. They did say, hey, I don't follow what you're trying to do, but you probably know more about the world than I do, and you probably have had better education than I have had. And while I may be much better aware of the world in other forms, the world of business I don't really understand. I would leave it to you. If you think that's a good idea for you to do, go ahead and do it, right? And that's what we did. So the first 3 years were somewhat different when you look at the overall journey for the company as we defined our markets. But the belief in international markets never went away. And I would say starting 2008, I had this lifestyle which I'm not very proud of, and I don't think my family enjoyed it very much, but I used to spend 2 weeks in the US and 6 weeks in India, right? So pretty much I'm on a plane. And the initial trips may have been 3 weeks, 4 weeks, before I figured that 2 weeks is about the optimal point where I miss my Taif Sadam and I have to come back, right? So everyone knew this. My parents knew it. My 3-year-old son or 2-year-old son at that point knew dad is going to disappear at any point. All my colleagues in office knew. Slowly my customers knew that I'm only a phone call away and probably a couple of weeks away before hitting the US again. And so we kept doing this between 2008 and 10. Those were difficult years given the global financial crisis in the US. We were not winning business really, but we did find some opportunity here and there. I still remember conversations where people were making fun saying, you seem like a nice guy, so I said I'll meet you, but I don't know if I have a job, right? So they're saying AIG is going through a bailout, they're saying General Motors could shut down. We have no idea what we are up against, right? So, but happy to talk to you, and let's see how far this goes. I had another rule which we perfected in that period, and which I've tried to kind of then pass on to everybody in my sales team, which I call it takes 6 meetings to close the sale, right? You need to get in front of your customers, the same person, the same company, as long as they're still in the company, 6 times before they will buy from you, right? And there is no resistance to persistence. You cannot give up after a meeting or twice or go hunting somewhere else. You need focus. You need to come back to the same people, and this is a relationship sale. This is people are buying from people. They are not buying a product or a service or a technology. So you need to build that relationship, and it takes you 6 meetings, right? And I must say that persistence and going through that tough period of 2008 and 9 really helped us in the longer term. And so when the markets turned around in 2010 and the businesses started looking up again and there was more optimism in the markets, all the seeds we planted in 2008, 9 and 10 started paying off. And we won our first big opportunities in the US in 2010. And I still remember in 6 weeks we went from a company which had 80% of its revenue from India to 95% of its revenue from international markets. And we have never turned around since then. As in, that's been the kind of storyboard for the business all through. So I truly believe picking the markets is really important, right? So while opportunities are there in front of you all the time, it's more important for you to know which direction you're navigating and what is your game, and stick with that game, right? And there is no right or wrong. There are other games which are equally good, but maybe it's not your game. You have to figure out what is your strength and play to your game. Some of the other defining aspects to our markets where we only want to sell to rich customers, right? So we were very clear even in our very early years when we didn't have Fortune 500 customers that we are only going to sell to Fortune 500 customers. And we are only going to go after the most well-recognized brands in the world. And there will be enough people who ask us that question saying, that, why would they buy from you? And yes, they are the most well-recognized brand, but who are you and why do you matter for them? And that's a problem for us to solve, right? But we are very clear that even though there are distractions today, even today, like I was there in the US about 3 weeks back, meeting some of our sales teams, doing what I do in terms of trying to convince them to buy into our principles and our stories and make sure that's what they take to market. And there will be those distractions where people are saying, I want to sell to this $1 billion company, which I think is a good opportunity for us. And I have to again go back to the pulpit and go back to, hey, this is how we built this business, which is by selling to the wealthiest companies out there, which can go through any downturn without any problems at all. And they have deep pockets and ability to spend multiple years with you, not just in the first year that you won the business from them. And that's the market that we want to focus on. Yes, there are other businesses which can be focused on other markets, but we are not set up for other things. Our overheads, the way we hire people, the way we spend money, everything defines the cost of winning a customer is significantly higher. Unless we focus on the richest customers, we are not making money, right? So all those principles were put in place very early on. And I still remember all these conversations between 2008 and 12. And the good news is we had a very good team, right? And that's where the second part, the minds come in. One of the things we over-engineered early in the company was pay top dollar and hire really capable people who will challenge us, right? If you ask them, of course, they'll say, Venkat is a stubborn guy, he won't easily give in and accept my idea, but that's part of the game in terms of the debates, the fights that you have, the way to kind of find the path forward. None of us know the truth, but we need to have those conversations. The good news is some of them still, whatever, if they are still with us or even otherwise when I meet them elsewhere, do tell me, I remember you told us then, I didn't think this will happen, but good to see it has actually played out the way you told us it's going to play out, right? So I think these principles in terms of what is our market, whom are we going to sell to, and we again made the choice within those markets of we are going to sell to business users and not to CIOs and CTOs, right? One of the challenges and differentiation we always face is people look at us as a technology company, right? In fact, I noticed somebody just introduced us as Latent View Technologies. And that's a very conscious choice we made. We won't use technology anywhere in our business. We may use technology, but our business is all about analytics. And we were quite lucky that we made that choice very early on. We had no idea in 2005 that analytics will reach the summits that it has reached now. But we were very clear that that's the area we want to focus on. And the way we differentiated also is we will focus on business buyers. So we'll go to the heads of marketing, we'll go to the heads of supply chain, we'll go to the heads of finance. We're not going to the CIO's office, we're not going to the CTO's office, because everybody and their uncle is queuing up there, right? We're not going there. We are going to go to places where nobody else is going, right? So that means we need to have the people who know how to talk to all these people. We need to have the people who know how to kind of create the storyboards and the solutions which appeal to all these business users, right? But it also meant the amount of money that those people have may be limited, but I'm saying at our point, like we are Lilliputians. Even today we are a Lilliput, but that time it was even tinier. And we said, we don't need a huge sum of money. We just need to get into these large logos at the right places so that we have a runway ahead of us and we build a franchise and we grow from here, right? And those were conscious choices we made in terms of how we defined our market and how we kind of went about building it out. That widened a little as we brought in professional leadership, and they started questioning some of those choices as well, saying, hey, why not sell in Europe? Why are you so dependent only on the US? Why not sell in Asia? Why not kind of look at India as a market? And so it's an evolution over time where we are broadening the definition of what is our market. And today, as the opportunity spectrum has evolved, some of those original choices have also changed. Today, we actually have conversations with the set of people who are called chief data officers. And they're a bit of a hybrid. They are neither purely in the technology space, they are neither purely running businesses, but they are owning an asset to a business which is quite important for large companies, which is all about data. And in some cases, we also talk to CIOs now because the kind of needs have changed, which is becoming more technical. It was not as technical when we originally started out, where we were only talking the business language. So, and I think it's a good thing for business to be adaptable to the changing times. You can't sink your head in sand and say, my business is only this. You need to have a very clear direction, but you need to be adaptable. And that's a choice we are starting to make. And I wouldn't say we do it extremely well, but there are things that we are doing right, which has brought us this far. We still need to correct many other things so that we get even better in terms of how far we go. So I think that's probably pretty much covers most of what I had to say in terms of markets, and I'm sure some of this will come up in the questions. Moving on to the minds part, as I said at the beginning, there is over-engineering we did at the beginning. There are certain types of people that we wanted to bring in. We always felt analytics is a business-led solution. Even today, that's the way we go to market. It's not about technology. It's not about the math part. It's primarily about understanding business problems and then figuring out what data do we have for us to answer these business questions in a data-driven way. And these are simple business questions, which many of you probably deal with on a daily basis in your business, right? If you look at retail as a business, right? There are lots of cases where you're taking decisions on what is the product I should merchandise, right? What should be on my shelf, right? How many people actually walk into my store every day? And how many of them actually try that particular product out? How many of them eventually go on to buy that product, right? And what is the kind of commissions I make on this product so that it makes sense for me to stock more of this? Are there any seasonal trends in our business? Is our customer changing in any particular way? So there are tens of questions that you can come up with in every part of running a business. And business owners, many of you, probably grapple with a lot of these decisions. I think 30 years back, 40 years back, the questions were still there. Nothing has really changed in terms of how you run a business, but you probably didn't have data 40 years back to actually answer any of this, right? And you have to use your intuition, your judgment, maybe what your friends tell you, what your peer groups tell you. Based on that, you are making decisions. And sometimes they work perfectly well. Some other times they don't work very well, but hopefully you do more right than wrong, and that ensures you're still in business and you're growing, right? The good news about all the innovation that's happened in the last 30, 40 years is it's taking out the guesswork. You don't really need to use human judgment all the time. You need to use it even today, but in a much more limited way, only when data is data is not able to answer the business questions, right? But otherwise, data is very precise. It tells you pretty much exactly what is happening, right? And it is important for managers then to start looking at data with that belief that I have the ability to make these decisions. And the good news about how math has evolved is also, and again, we are not inventing things. When I say math has evolved, I'm talking more about 1920 to 1970, not so much 1970 to 2020 or 2022. The innovations we are doing in math is probably the last 3% now. The big chunks are already done by the time, 1975, the computers got into play, right? But the good news is the readiness and the belief in math is going up all the time. The readiness to adopt it and the belief in math by management teams is going up all the time. So it is actually possible for you to forecast and predict with a very high level of accuracy in certain parts of your business. In certain other parts of your business, the volatility is too high, or there are events that are happening which have never happened before at the scale that is happening, like the pandemic just we lived through, and no amount of math can predict what is happening out there, right? Because it's a once in a lifetime kind of event. It has never happened before. We don't really have a template or a comparison to actually look at. But the good news is most of business doesn't have such events. Most of business is very repetitive. There is a certain rhythm, there is a certain pattern, there is a certain direction which business goes. And all you need to do is use the computing power and the math and intelligent people to be able to make all of this happen. And that's exactly what our business is all about. One of my favorite equations is what I call business plus data plus math equals insight, right? And that's exactly what our business is. We have people who understand business, we have people who understand data, and we have people who understand math. And we put all of this together to get us to the insight that is needed for us to kind of produce the story, which we then go on to sell to the customer. Today, the great minds that we have been able to attract over the years, and we have so many alumni from our company who are now in some of the biggest brands in the world, some of whom are our customers as well. But many of them are like family. At least the first 200 people, I pretty much knew everyone by name. I knew their family background. I knew everything about them. Sadly, that's not the story today, where the scale is much bigger, as also my hands are not on the steering wheel anymore, so I wouldn't get as many opportunities as I used to get earlier. And I think those minds really made a big difference in terms of building this business. And a true knowledge business is all about bringing those knowledgeable people into the fold, selling the vision to them, holding on to them for as long as you can, and make the business viable even when some of them choose to leave, the engine still motors on, right? And they've just taken us from station A to station B or station B to station C. Now we are much stronger, much bigger, and we can kind of motor on further. But there is a lot of thought that went into getting all those people together, and getting them to believe in this common vision and helping them celebrate the wins that we have through the course. And if you ask a lot of our people why they have spent time with us, most times the answers are around the quality of the peer group that they work with, because they have these learning opportunities of working with some of these smart people next to them, and they learn from each other. The quality of the customers that we serve. Again, there you interact with really big brands in the world. In our IPO document, you would see names like Adobe or Uber or 7-Eleven or companies like that. These are all big brands anywhere in the world, and they have the opportunity to work with some of these brands in solving some of the toughest problems in the world, right? So that's those are the binding portions. But I also feel many times it's that opportunity they have to actually do things pretty much on their own. They own a corner of the business that they completely control, and they can make choices which is in the company's best interest. And that autonomy really holds on to a lot of those people as well. And that's a culture which we have very assiduously worked at building out over the last 15 years. We succeed at certain points. At certain other points, they do feel, hey, you're constraining me a lot. But it's a push and pull, which is part of the game, which is how we have been able to kind of hold on to these people. Finally, I come to money, right? And the reason I sequenced it this way as well is many a times I feel the entrepreneurship story pretty much gets clouded over completely by the money talk, right? This company raised this much money, that company is deploying that much money, or there is this big exit and all this money is happening and all that. I come from the school of thought where like money is a byproduct, right? So yeah, you need money to take risk, and there is without doubt you can have the best ideas in the world, but if you have nothing in your pocket, you cannot actually take risk. But the reality is there are so many businesses which have been built because not because they had so much money, but because those entrepreneurs actually were very creative in terms of how they tap money. But more importantly, they figured out the markets and minds much better than anyone else, right? And there will be equally enough businesses which had all the capital in the world, but didn't really progress further because they didn't get the other parts of the equation right. At the same time, I do acknowledge there are certain businesses which are very capital intensive, like you're building an oil refinery or something. Look, the first thing you need to figure out is how do I raise those 50,000 crores or whatever is the number needed for you to kind of get into that business. No questions, right? So no big talk of markets or minds has any role to play there. You start with the money. The good news is 95% of businesses don't fall in that category. 95% of businesses probably really need the ability to kind of figure out the markets really well, have a great team which stays with you and helps you kind of grow this business. And then the money is one ingredient. In fact, in our journey, the way it played out, very early on, we used to go and ask our Indian customers for an advance, right? And this, for many of them, was a shock, as in they're not used to even paying whatever, 3 months after the work is finished. But in our case, we said, I'm not even starting this work unless you pay me 50% upfront, right? And luckily for us, the small cohort of companies that we were dealing with, although initially they were taken aback, eventually paid up because they felt the kind of work that we are doing and the impact that we are going to create in their business is worthy enough for them to give that kind of money, or they were just indulging us, or maybe the amount of money was so small for them that they didn't really care, right? We are talking about a few tens of lakhs here, right? So it worked out well that we could keep afloat. Then we did all the basic stuff that many of you do really well, which is work with a local commercial bank, go and get a working capital loan, in fact, the first time we put together a nice office, we did the stupid thing of paying for everything from our pocket and put up a nice office and got it inaugurated and all that. And then we went to the bank and said, I want money. And they said, what do you need money for? I said, no, we want to hire 3 salespeople in the US and we want to build this brand in the US. And they said, sorry, none of that can be funded by us. Do you have any office space that I can kind of furbish and give you money for chairs and tables and a false ceiling or something? I said, no, I just did that 3 months back. So the next time you do it, you come back and talk to me and we'll be able to fund that. And which is exactly what we did. So the good news is business is growing really fast, and within a year we had to open up another office space. So we said, okay, this time none of our capital, we go to a bank. So we went to a bank and said, can I get a term loan, right? Maybe a 5-year term loan, not a lot of money, maybe a couple of crores. And we had to come up with creative ways of how do you get a couple of crores for building an office space, at the same time keep the office space frugal and nice looking, but don't spend 2 crores on it. So we had to do all of that and get that money from the bank. The good news is they were ready to fund it. They just had their constraints in terms of how they lend money. They need to see an asset. They need to see something they can take and walk away with. And if you say, here is a smart guy, they said, that's of no use to me, right? So we went through all those learning curves in terms of how we handle money. 2010 or 2009 was a really tough period where the future didn't look very great, right? So the US market started to come down. Even in India, I think the go growth years of 2005, 6, 7 was kind of starting to taper off. And so we actually went and met a lot of venture capitalists. So it's not that we never tried it, right? So we did go and speak to them. Many of them said, look, we don't fund businesses like you, right? This is a boring business. This is like you go from X to Y to Z and it's like you're going in a very linear fashion. We only want to fund businesses which goes from 1 to 10 to 400 to 7,000, right? If that's your trajectory, come and talk to me. If your trajectory is going to be 10 to 20 to 40 to 80, that's too boring. We don't fund this, right? And so we said, okay, after 10 such conversations, we said, this is not going anywhere and this is not a good use of management time, and let's get back to talking to customers, which is probably a more productive use of time. And we'll figure out, keep our ship as frugal as we can, and we'll sail through this period and things should change, right? And I think in many ways that foolhardy optimism is probably what keeps businesses afloat. And it's very important you have a support group which kind of helps you through that period, which is equally foolhardy and which says, yeah, I've seen it before, things turn around. You just need to keep going at it, right? And that's what we did. So I think the money part, the interesting thing is it starts chasing you when you probably don't need it a lot, right? So once we were maybe around 8 years old or 10 years old, around the time we got in the first professional CEO, we are already well past, maybe very close to the 100 crore mark in revenue. We are doing reasonably well. And we are very profitable because we have always had a business model where we only live within our means and we go after the richest companies. We charge them the price we believe is due for the quality of deliverables that we give, and we manage our margins tightly, and that ensured we are very healthy, profitable, good business, at least in certain lenses. And so now the bigger P's started chasing us and saying, hey, we can really help you kind of scale this up. You coming to the first 100 is different from going to the next 1,000 or going to the first $1 billion, and that's a very different game. We know that game. So we're going to take a third of this business and used to loan a big chunk of this company, but we are going to really infuse huge amounts of capital into this company. Maybe we'll buy 3 other companies The first time I ever heard the phrase roll up was when I spoke to any of these people. They say, we're going to roll up 4 or 5 companies and create a new entity, and then we'll probably list this, and don't worry, we'll take all this risk, and you don't need to do much. Somehow, again, maybe it's the background I came from, maybe because my parents are not very well off, so we never got any money from them other than a good education. I was skeptical of most of these conversations, and it probably helped that we didn't kind of give away. And maybe at some point very early on, somebody gave me this whole story around how you should treat equity as your body part, right? Don't let anyone touch anything. It's like your kidney, right? Yes, you can operate with one kidney, but don't give away that one kidney. You hold on to it as long as you can when you really need it. So somehow it just stuck inside my head that that's the way we need to treat equity. And I said, sorry, not interested. We are very well off as a business. We are generating cash. We are able to reinvest that cash. We have no use for alternate use of cash. None of the promoters want to buy a fancy car or take any cash out. Everything comes back into the business. So we are in good shape. I don't think we need this help. So luckily for us, money played out very well that way. Very quickly, we were debt free. We didn't really need any of those loans. We still had those relationships primarily to ensure when you never know when the going can go wrong, as in the rainy season is around the corner. So it's always good to have all those banking relationships. In my first career as a credit analyst, we were taught this phrase called financial flexibility. And that again kind of stuck in my head, saying you have to have, when the car hits the wall, what can you bank on, right? What do you have? Do you have those airbags which will ensure you actually survive? And so he said, even though it looked very unbelievable that we'll need all this cash, we said, no, we still need that credit line here. Not just in India. We managed to get credit lines in the US, which is a primary market, where none of the promoters are either a resident, forget being a citizen or a green card holder, we are not even resident there, right? So if JP Morgan Chase wants to catch me, they have to first get on a plane and come and look for me in Thiruvanmiyur. There is no way, right? But in spite of that, just purely on the quality of the customers that we have, purely on the basis of the kind of how we have grown our business till that point in time, they were ready to give us a credit line. In fact, the person who gave the credit line said, just don't ask me for a tiny sum, because that doesn't help me hit a big number. Ask for a significant enough sum so that I also feel I have done a good deal with you. And whether you need the money or not, it's for you to figure out. But take a decent enough credit line and start using some of that credit line. Only then my credit committee will believe this is kind of worth it. So the starting line was probably a couple of million, right? Which in Indian terms was not the kind of money any bank was ready to give, and there is no collateral really. I don't own a home, I don't own anything in that country, right? But people are ready to do business. So which is what I feel lots of time when people come up to me and say, no, you don't understand how business is done. I think it's probably good to not understand anything and go with an open mind, right? Saying, I don't know what is possible. I'm just going to go out and try, right? And maybe I'll fall flat on my face, it's fine. I can get up and walk again. Or maybe I will actually discover some ways which nobody else has figured out, right? And if you don't have that self-belief, it's very hard to kind of work without money, right? So the good news for us, money played out really well. And even as we brought in those external CEOs, obviously for them it was a little bit of a shock, saying, really you run this business like this is like so tight-fisted, as in there is really no space for maneuver. And I said, for the right reasons we always have money, right? For the wrong reasons, sorry, we don't have money. For the right reasons could be, hey, I want to hold, I remember the first customer event we held in 2014, within 6 months of the first CEO joining in, was at the MoMA, which is a Museum of Modern Art in New York City, which is probably one of the best venues in New York City. And we found out they actually rent it out. You can have these fancy paintings and sculptures all around you, and in the evening, nobody's using that space. And so MoMA says, you can have the space. The only rule is you'll have to buy the food from us, right? We said, no problem, we'll do that. So we got customers in. They were very happy to come and attend the event in a grand venue. And our speaker was very happy to come and actually do this at a very nice venue. And it creates a certain aura about the business, and we said, fine, whatever it takes to spend money on that, we'll do it, and let's do it there. And since then, we have held in some of the best venues in the country, in the US, or even in other parts. Of course, sometimes we get lucky. Like we wanted to hold it in Munich at a certain place, and our customer got wind of this because we had to go and invite them for some of these events. I said, where are you holding it? I said, we are thinking we'll hold it in this hotel. I said, why? We have the best venue in the city, right? We own the city pretty much. So here is our museum right across our headquarters. Let's hold it here. And I will invite another 30 people from our company. I said, sure, why not? If you're ready to do it, we'll do it. I think that is the kind of trust, that is the kind of relationship, the strength of relationship that we aspire to build. It worked out in that case. I wouldn't say we do that well in every case, but that really ensures for the right reasons you use money, but as long as you're careful about money, you always have money for the right reasons, right? So that's the way it kind of played out for us. Finally, I'll spend a few minutes on this whole capital market thing. Maybe that's one of your questions, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But a lot of people ask us, everything is going well. You guys are probably already 300-400 crores in revenue, or 300 crores in revenue. You probably had more than 100 crores in the bank. Why do you really need to kind of go IPO, right? You can continue along as you always did, and maybe do another 15 years. So while some of us get to come and speak at these podiums as founder, co-founder, whatever else it is, the reality is there are at least 50, 60 people in the business who are actually the people who built up the business from scratch, right? And they all have ownership interest in the company. And they all have to see the monetization of that opportunity as well. It can't be only about us, right? I'm very happy with the amount of money I have. Nothing changed for me in the last 20 years, and I hope not to change in the next 20 either. But for them, it's a very different equation with money. And they are at a very different stage of life as well, where they still want to buy their first home or they want to do something else. And that's sometimes some of the people actually bluntly come and ask us that question, saying, what's your plan? What are you going to do about it? While some others don't know how to ask, but when they leave, sometimes they leave us because they believe this paper that they were given is maybe as good as toilet paper. We have this conversation where I'm trying to convince them, don't leave. You have something really valuable in your hand. Someday this will open. So he said, when is that someday? I can't wait around for another 20 years. I need to kind of plan for my next 5. So I'm going to go, right? And sadly, some of those really capable people who should have gained even more didn't probably gain as much, right? Because we didn't unlock that value for a long period of time. So that was one of the criteria. But the biggest reason why we did this is, for every business, there are ups and downs. As I keep saying, entrepreneurship is all about high highs and low lows, right? So the amplitude becomes bigger. Everybody has highs and lows, but an entrepreneur really has those days where you're the king, next day you're the pauper, right? So you need to learn how to ensure you ride the wave well. And we felt maximizing market opportunity by raising enough funds, which allows us to become the top dog in the game rather than be an also-ran, is quite important, right? And to do that, sometimes you need to build confidence in the rest of the team as well as in other stakeholders that we have the capital. We now have inbound conversations about people saying, I want to sell this business to you, or here is an opportunity, or an intermediary brings us a business saying, this company we can buy. Do you guys have the capital and interest? And I can tell you that volume of conversations have grown tenfold ever since we went IPO. And that's just the way the markets work. Your visibility goes up, opportunities open up. So the business opportunity for the company to go, whether it's inorganic like this or even organically, where today when we have conversations with our existing customers, many of them have registered somewhere that this event happened. It's great validation. They're saying, hey, I picked you 10 years back when you were a nobody, right? And now I can see that this company has gone public and it's in the top 400 companies for your country. So I think it's the market opportunity which is a primary driver. The number 2 driver were all our people and the monetization that we owed them. And really the business on its own, if you go purely by cash, didn't need this, right? So we already had more than 100 crores in the bank, which we are not using productively in a way which is high risk taking. But at the same time, I think businesses do choices like, in fact, somebody gifted me a book which is about the story of Titan, right? The watch brand, and which is now a retail behemoth. It's amazing when you read those numbers, right? The amount of money Tata's put up to start that company. The revenue of that business in the first 5 years of its operations. Unbelievable, right? You would think hundreds of crores of money is getting pumped into businesses like that. No. It was literally 2 crores of capital or something that Tata's gave, right? Or even lesser. And that's how businesses got started. And so I think it's very important we kind of relate risk-taking to not just capital, but it's also about mindsets. Risk-taking is all about mindset. It's all about having that belief that I know where the future is going, and I'm happy to back my opinion with taking this risk, right? And I'm ready to fail when some of those risks don't play out, right? And I'm happy to get back on the horse and try again. That's what risk-taking is all about. It's not about, do I have enough money in the bank? Because if you keep looking at the bank balance every morning and saying, do I have enough money to make this decision? You won't make any decisions. So these were some of the reasons why we chose to kind of do the IPO. Eventually, obviously, we had no idea that the IPO will have the kind of reception that it had. We knew it will sell through. We had very good conversations with most of the anchor investors that we spoke to. And we had this self-belief that this is a quality business. Put yourself in the shoes of another public investor. Would you invest in this or not? And we felt this is a great business. It will get funded. That's not a problem. But we didn't realize the kind of stories and the kind of success that it would have. As I explained to many people, those funny numbers that are quoted don't really matter because we still get to take only that 600 less the fees to the bankers or whatever it is. So much smaller number in 3 digits is all we get to take. Those 8, 10, 11, 12, whatever was the number of digits don't really matter. They don't even appear anywhere. Nowadays you all have the ASBA and UPI and all this. Most times money doesn't even move. But it's good to see, and I think it certainly helped the visibility part within India in a big way. And one of the challenges we have in growing our business is the minds part, which is how do we attract even better talent in the country? And we still bet a lot on India as our talent source, even though we probably have employees of maybe 8 different nationalities already in our business. But India is really the biggest source of our talent, and we want to kind of build that talent brand in India. In the market, again, we had a choice of going public in international markets or going public in India. And our philosophy was very simple. Like, look, we don't understand all these international markets. We are structured to kind of go public in India. Of course, the bankers are ready to promise anything, and they're ready to kind of flip you in any direction and create new entities and all that. We said, look, it's all too complicated. That's not the kind of people we are. Keep it very simple as you can. And we would rather be a reasonable sized company in the Indian market in terms of valuation and market perception than nobody in a very large market. And so that's a choice we made, saying we are sticking to India and we'll take this public in India itself, right? So with that, I'm going to stop my ramble. Hopefully you got the flavor of the story and you got the ideas that helped us kind of bring us this far. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Now we will go with question answers.
Shall I? Yeah, that's okay. So we got a few questions from the members. Am I audible? Is this working? Yeah. So there are a few questions that is there, and I've kind of grouped them together to sound logical to me. Hopefully it is logical to everybody else as well. This AI ML, let's talk first about the AI ML. So AI ML is always used together. So is the machine intelligent because it is learned, or is the machine learning because it is intelligent?
So I think it's more of the former, and if anything, machines are pretty dumb things, right? And they can't really get very far without humans, at least today. Right? And human intelligence, even today, it's only in very repetitive tasks which does not involve judgment and does not involve counterintuitive thinking that machines can score, right? The good news is there are various parts of a business which can be automated, and that's where the machines are able to kind of score. But on their own, they can't do this. Most times, they need to be given patterns as training sets for them to kind of learn from. There is a new branch of computer science where some of these machines are able to learn. You give them some example, they can create a new board game for you, or they can create a new musical piece for you, or artwork for you. But in reality, how much of that is harnessable for solving a business problem is still out there. So it's not yet happened.
Right, so what's then the difference between predictive analytics and artificial intelligence in that case?
So artificial intelligence is the overarching phrase, right? So AI/ML doesn't necessarily have to be used together. AI pretty much covers ML as well. It covers predictive analytics. It covers all ways in which intelligence can be enhanced by using computing power, right? So predictive analytics is a very, very narrow field where you're always looking ahead. If you look at the continuum as hindsight, insight, and foresight, predictive analytics is primarily around foresight, right? While in lots of businesses, hindsight is actually very powerful, right? Of course, the limiting factor is your readiness to accept you are wrong, and what happened in the past is something I can learn from. But there is a lot you can learn just by looking back, right? And a lot of businesses do spend money in trying to solve the hindsight problem. And then there is the insight problem, which is where a lot of judgment comes in, which is like, hey, I have data, I know certain things are happening, I just don't know why it is happening, right? So the insight could be like some of the businesses we have done where if somebody does 3 transactions about a certain order value, right, then they really, like Amazon is not a customer, but let's say for Amazon, the insight could be if somebody has bought 3 electronics products more than 5,000 rupees from our website in the last 1 year, they will go on to stay as a loyal customer. I don't really need to spend money to kind of keep them loyal. They already understand my value proposition, and they have done the metric that I need them to clear for them to kind of do. That's a very powerful insight. Once you learn that, you are saving significant amounts of money in terms of things that you would otherwise spend money on if you didn't have this insight. And that frees you up to spend the money on areas in the business where you really need to spend, right? And so that's really the differentiation between what is predictive analytics and what artificial intelligence would cover.
Right. So are there any simple examples that you can give as to how AI is affecting our lives today?
It is already there. As a consumer, we are all using AI pretty much every day in various products and services that we use without realizing it, and that's the best way to sell AI, without talking about AI, right? If you look at pretty much all of digital products, the e-commerce, all the things that you do, they all use this technology all the time, where you're trying to kind of suggest to you what is the next best product that you should be buying, all of those usual things. But more interestingly, in the most simple things like the cell phone that you use or the telephone calls that you're making, a lot of data is being used in routing those calls and making sure without spending extra money in capital expenditure, you are still getting the quality of service that you need to have for your product, right? And that's a big use case in terms of AI, where how do you make money even more powerful? Where you're not spending big amounts of capital for everything, but you're using your capital more efficiently. So there are many examples in your day-to-day life, pretty much everything you do. And slowly you will see some of this play out even in things like how traffic is managed in the city. Because once every car is connected to a network, and that is a promise of something like 5G, you would have real-time data in terms of the actual traffic which is there in the city at any given point in time. And the good news for countries like India, and that is so played out so well for us in the last 25 years, is because we don't have traffic lights in probably 25 of, not more than the first 20 cities in the country, the next set of cities will get really intelligent traffic lights as the default right? Because the technology, everything else that is falling in place will actually create. Today, the cellular network that we have in this country is actually far superior to the cellular network in many other countries, simply because we had nothing. We are starting from zero and we went straight to 3G maybe at the beginning. While in their case, they had to go through a certain phase. So they have that baggage they can't throw away very quickly. And they're still trying to kind of monetize and leverage. And so there will be many ways in which AI will play out in our lives.
Right, so you did mention that AI is used to predict consumer preferences, right? Is there an ethical conflict there?
I think it's a cost versus benefit, right? So in the sense, as long as consumers have a choice, and which is really that long 10-page document they put in front of you and try to make you say, I agree, which most of us do without even thinking. But it is your choice, right? You can say, I don't agree, and then they can't do certain things and give you better preferences, right? But once you've given that agreement to them, they are using this in a way which is beneficial to you, and most of the times you do get value in return. It is not that there is no value. It's a choice you have whether you want that value or not. I still have friends who say, I won't own a cell phone. The only way you can reach me is a landline. Because that thing can track me wherever I go, and they have data on everything I do. Now, that's a choice. 99.9% of the people don't make that choice. 99.9% of the people are saying, look, I'll carry this device, it's fine. I also need to be reached and I also need to make calls. So it's a trade-off. So it's the same story which plays out in many ways. I think it is important that customer education is there so that people understand the quality of their choices. Maybe certain choices you can do without, right? Or you can be experimenting with your choices. Like in one of the recent trips I learned, Apple Maps is actually doing a much better job at walking directions as compared to Google Maps. I said, hey, I totally forgot about that thing that is always on my phone. I'm going to try this for the next, whatever, 1,000 kilometers of driving or 100 kilometers of walking and see what happens. And so that's a choice I'm making, and I'm choosing to give data to a certain party but not to a different party. And you get, in return, a service from a certain party but not from a different party.
Right, I have a few more questions on the ethical part, but I'll come back to this. The AI or ML seems to be applied to large data, right? So if there is an SME who wants to benefit out of it and do not have large data or have a lot of unstructured data, is there anything that they can leverage on, or does Latent View help SMEs who may not have large amount of data to improve the businesses or customer experiences that they give?
Sure. I did talk about our market choices, so we don't really play in the SME space. That is not to say the SMEs don't have needs or there are no solutions for them. It's just that we are too small a company to be everywhere. So we are making our choices saying we'll only play in this corner, and we try to become better at playing in that corner rather than try to be everywhere. But one thing I do want to highlight is analytics doesn't always necessarily need large amounts of data, right? I think today if you go and do a Google Trends search, you'll find big data nobody is talking about anymore, right? It was the belief at some point that large amounts of data was needed. But very quickly businesses realized that you cannot, as in data is a multi-layered thing. You cannot have large amounts in every type of data that you need, right? And there is granularity, there is kind of variety in data that as you go down a certain branch of data, you would find you don't have enough data. So I think the algorithms have matured to a point where we can work with smaller amounts of data, we can work with unstructured data. In fact, today we work with visual data, we work with voice data. So there are various types of data that companies have started working with. And small and medium businesses, the opportunity for them is to ride on products that become available on top of large platforms. So if you go to an Amazon Web Services, they showcase other providers who have built solutions on top of Amazon Web Services. So if you're a small company which uses a call center, you actually get an API where you pay per conversation that you're running through that voice engine, and it can transcribe everything that is happening in your call center and allow you to kind of search on what are people calling us for. And this is possible even for a very small company to do, and you're only paying for what you use.
At some point in time, you felt the need to get a professional CEO into your company. Was it difficult to let go of the steering wheel?
I think it's a process. It is not difficult, but there is a temptation always because you've been there and you believe you know. The good news is I have been very fortunate. I have enough people around me who keep reminding me you're not very smart. So I don't need to remind myself. They will remind me very quickly, saying you stay out and let them run it. I think the professional CEOs, more than capability, bring diversity in thought. They've challenged a lot of things that we have done. They've actually come up with suggestions on how we handle our own people, how we handle customers, how we think about customers, which on our own we may not have come up with. And sometimes you're just emotionally attached to your business that it's like your children. You're ready to accept enough mistakes by them because they are your children, right? And just like my parents did with me. And so it's important you sometimes ask the teacher about the child rather than you only go with your own opinion of the child. And that helps a lot if you want the best interest of the child.
Right. If I loosely couple AI, ML, analytics together as data sciences, okay, what would you suggest to entrepreneurs sitting here that they could look at data sciences as either an opportunity or something to learn or something to use? And if these people could also recommend to their children who want to study data sciences, what would you suggest that they do?
Yeah. No, I think without a doubt, this is a very fundamental shift in management science, how businesses are run, right? So that's really where the theme is. It's not so much about technology. It's not so much about innovations that are happening. It's not so much about Google and Facebook and Apple and FANG and all that. I think the fundamental issue here is decisions which could only be taken by judgment or gut feel or intuition or group learning, you can actually now take decisions using data. And an algorithm can pretty much decide in 90% of the cases very accurately whether you deserve a credit card or you don't deserve a credit card. Right? It's only in 10% of cases a human judgment is needed. And so you only set up your business in such a way that anything that can be automated, anything that an algorithm can do, I'm going to give it to the algorithm. It is tireless, it works 24/7, it makes very few mistakes, and if it makes a mistake, if I give it feedback, it doesn't take offense. It will correct itself and it will do it, right? And I only focus on the 10%, which is the differentiator in my business. And so every business should think seriously about, this is just a management discipline, just like, I don't know, cost accounting came up as a discipline 200 years back or 150 years back, or any other form of discipline that would have come. This is another form of discipline for a business. And in terms of career paths, absolutely. I think just as computer science was touted as a career path, and it was a big opener to opportunities for a generation of people, data science, which in some sense combines computer science with math and an awareness of business problem solving, is a great career choice. I have a 20-year-old in university, and he was there for the Diwali break with me yesterday, and we are having the same conversation. And I told him, hey, you should. Of course, he mocks me saying, I hear you run some data science company. Can I not just get a job there? I said, no, you're not getting one. You have to go find your own path.
And, anybody in the audience, do you have any questions that you would like to ask? No? So, can I ask? Sorry? Okay.
Yeah, I think the soup and the food is
getting ready.
We have probably taken more time than.
Yeah, I would like to end with one last question, which is more interesting to me as such. There was a fuss about Facebook Research AI shutting down its bots because they started talking in a language that humans couldn't understand. So are we looking at a scenario where excessive use of ML or AI would lead to a zombie world or some taxes or robo-tax or something of that sort?
I don't believe so. I think the good news is most of the innovation is still in the hands of humans. And I think it's part of the experimentation. It's also maybe their PR firm told them, do something like this will get a lot of coverage, and this is the reason for us to kind of go out and do this. But otherwise, I think we are very far from a scenario where the computers take over and they can run your world, simply because our world is really chaotic. There's just too many variables which you cannot configure for, and the changes are so fast and dynamic. You can't learn only from history. You have to constantly keep looking ahead, and that's what keeps it interesting for all humans, and I don't see it changing for another 100 years, if not more. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and happy Diwali once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time, valuable time and insights into the business and enlightening us with your analytics. Thank you very much. As a token of love and affection, we will give you our memento. It's a personalized memento done by our own member Divya.